Hello and welcome to this quick video. I'm making this video because this little X-Lite radio that I've had for a long time, one of the radios that I love from FrSky, has done what my Taranis did the other day, which started coming up to let me know that the RTC battery is giving up. Now there's a little battery inside here, just like there is in most modern electronics actually, and definitely in FrSky radios, that is there to just battery back up everything, so when the radio is turned off or you take the batteries out to recharge them, all the settings aren't lost. Now it's typical, of course, that I was in the middle of doing a load of ELRS stuff, and this is the radio that I'm doing it with, it started to misbehave. So I had a quick look on the internet, really struggled to find a simple video to show you the steps to go through to swap the battery out. The battery that you're going to need is something like this. This is a Duracell 1220 button cell. I'll put a link to it on Amazon if you want to go and get one for yourself. But if you're having this problem, order yourself one of those, and then you'll only need a couple of other tools. A little small Phillips screwdriver is all you need. There are 2 screws in the back that you need to open up, and then something like a plastic tool, the kind of thing that you use to open a phone, can be very handy. You don't necessarily need one of these. You can use a flat bladed screwdriver, but you are going to have to get in and actually separate the back off the radio to get into all the gubbins. Now you can completely disassemble the radio if you want to do it, but I've done it in a way that's kind of preserved the majority of connections and the minimum amount of effort and invasion and potential to mess something up in the radio. So let me just jump on the bench and show you all the steps that I've gone through. So the first thing I recommend is to pop on any gimbal protectors that you have, just to stop your gimbals getting damaged, because we're going to have this thing upside down the majority of the time. Now these little pieces here at the back can just be pulled out with a pin, but actually you don't need to pull all these out. You just need to pull the 2 outside ones out, because under there are 2 little Phillips screws. You need to undo those, and that's the only 2 screws holding the back on. The rest is done with clips. So of course you need to take out the batteries. Let's make sure there's absolutely no power in this before we do it. I'd also recommend, it's also a good idea to connect it up to companion, do a backup as well, just in case something horrible goes wrong and you lose all your models. So with those 2 screws out, we need to get the tool in and work it around. It's really tricky to actually start it, but I found the way to do it is to actually start at the top. That seems to be one that gives you the easiest way to get in, and then just very gently move the tool around. There's nothing connected to the back of the radio, so you don't have to worry about that, but just have it in a couple of millimeters and just gently take it from the top round each of the shoulders, and you'll feel each of the catches popping one by one. And once it has all been undone, then you can lift the back off without any problems at all, and you're in the radio. And this is what you'll be presented with. Now the RF board here is the one at the top that we can look at, and under there is the little battery that we need to replace. So we need to move him. So I would clip off the little cable tie in the bottom left hand side, and that will allow us to pick it up. So we need to take off these 2 screws at the bottom, and then we can gently maneuver the entire piece out of the way without having to remove the antenna cable. Now with those 2 pieces done, you can just gently wiggle it out. Don't go mad. There's 2 little connectors underneath, and if you unplug those from the motherboard, it's a little bit tight, so you're going to have to probably get in the way here. With those 2 done, the whole board will kind of slide out the way, and there is the little battery at the back. Now you can flick that out with the tip of a very small screwdriver. Ideally I would use something that isn't metallic. Once that is out, then we need to put the new battery in. I would recommend try not to touch the battery. Make sure your hands are clean. Give them a good wash so they're not all greasy. You want the minimum amount of grease on this thing that you possibly can. So I would just drop it back in like that, and then use something that's non-metallic. I'm using this little plastic screwdriver here that's completely plastic to just pop it into place and make sure that it is seated properly, and the little spring-loaded catch on the left is all working. Now with that, then it's just a case of going and putting everything back together. So that's just going and doing everything backwards. So we're going to plug in both of these cables. Just take your time. There is enough room. There's even more room when you're trying not to film it. But again, I thought it would be useful to kind of show how to do this. Just make sure that everything is well seated and it's completely home. Try not to put any strain on the antenna cable that's on the top of this thing. And then it's just a case of moving it around to get the rotating controls into the top, and there's also kind of 2 posts that you have to push everything into. Now the big tip with this is that the rotating controls do have a little nubbin on them that's supposed to be outside, so make sure that those 2 little ears that are kind of connected onto the rotary controls are outside, and once it gets all lined up, it'll just push home. And it's a case of putting the 2 screws in the bottom and also replacing the cable tie as well. Now at this point the radio is basically back together, so it's worthwhile just triple checking everything looks okay, and then before you go too much further, just popping the batteries back in and popping the battery covers back on to make the connection for the other end of the battery, and just turning it on to make sure that 1, it will turn on, and 2, you've got rid of the error, because hopefully the new battery that you've just installed is all fine, but there's only one way to test it. So we'll turn it on, make sure it powers up. Yeah, absolutely, we can hear everything, the screen's working, the trims are all working. It looks like we've managed to do this without breaking anything, which is great. So now we've done that, it's then just a case of putting the back on and doing up the last couple of screws. So I'm going to replace the cable tie that I snipped off on this. This is just holding the cable out of the way, I think, to just stop it getting snagged on everything. This had to be clipped off in order to move the RF board out of the way to get to the battery. So I would just pop one back on here. It's probably not strictly necessary. The cable's nice and loose actually, but I'm just going to pop one on just so that is okay. We'll clip off the end, being very careful that we're only clipping the cable tie, not anything else, and that is now back in one piece, so we can put the back on. Now that again is going to be clipped. If I turn it over, you can see the big screws here that are going to press on the gimbals just to turn it into one or the other, and as you can hear, just big snapping noises. Sounds horrible, but just start at the top and work your way around, and make sure you get all the inside pieces as well, and it will feel as good as it always did. And now I've got my throttle back because those 2 big screws are pressing on the back to give me the mode 2 stuff that I need. Just double check all the controls work freely, nothing is binding, which it is, so we're in a great place. So we can just put in these 2 screws back into their positions on each shoulder, and with those done up, then it's just a case of putting the final parts back in place, just replacing these pieces that go over the screw holes. I'm putting the back on because I just think that makes the radio look a lot neater. Again, you only really need to take the 2 outer ones off to get to the 2 screws to take the back off. I took off everything because I wasn't sure where the screws were. Replace the batteries and put the caps on, and then hopefully we can power it up and it's still going to work. I always struggle to remember which cap is which. Slightly stiff, but they're getting better as it gets older. Mind you, this isn't a new radio at all. Okay, so turn it on.
Welcome to OpenTX.
That looks very, very promising. So we're all set. All we need to do is just reset the date and time on here. That will be lost because we have had the battery out of it, and then you should be back in business. So hopefully that helps if you have a radio, an X-Lite in a similar condition. Get yourself a Duracell or similar 1220 cell battery. Again, links below to the Amazon one that I'm using here, and that's the way you can do it. As long as you've got a little Phillips screwdriver and something to crack the case apart, you will be able to do it yourself and get over that problem and have your radio starting up again without that problem. Thank you for spending your time today watching that video. You can find me in all the usual places on social media, and if you're trying to learn about a subject, then check out the playlist. All of my videos are organized into easy to follow playlists that if you're trying to learn a topic will take you from the basics right the way through to some pretty advanced stuff.